Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, where everything you're about to hear and see has been done in one take. I'm your host, the One Take Man. First of all, Happy New Year, welcome to 2023, all of that jazz. Second of all, 30 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, January of 1993, a guitar duo consisting of Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Homem Christo changed their name from Darlin to Daft Punk. Over the next 28 years, they went on to have a very prolific career within the musical industry, as well as also venturing within certain adjacent fields. Aside from their 4 studio albums, they also have a plethora of remix albums, live albums, video albums, a soundtrack album, and several collaborations with a variety of musicians. The duo called it quits or dissolved in late January 2021, around 2 years ago, and I thought I would use this opportunity to dedicate a whole special month to them and their work. So yeah, this is the beginning of Daft Punk month, where I look into their 4 studio albums. This is, I have to say, somewhat of a downgrade from my initial plans for Daft Punk month, where I wanted to really cover their entire output. But when I went to research their output and saw just how much of it there was, I realized I really could not do it justice if I were to concentrate all of it in just 1 month. And in fact, if I'm to be completely honest, it would take maybe like 4 or 5 months of videos in order to really, share my opinions on their work. For that reason, I am instead starting small for the first Daft Punk month by only looking at their studio discography, and I'll cover the rest either in sporadic videos or other Daft Punk months. Anyway, moving on. I'll start this theme month by looking at their debut album, not Discovery, Homework. Yeah, it's always kind of messes me up, but whatever. Point is, their first album, Homework. Released in January of 1997, it was recorded over the past 4 years during the duo's early days of gigs and touring. In many ways, it is a very eclectic album, reflecting all of the various influences and musicians they have encountered within that time. I was often reminded of Afrika Bambaataa, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, and various other acts of the hip-hop generation, given all the experimentation and the variety of sounds that are present within this album. Going from big beat dance tracks to more meditative tracks to even, hard electro riffs. All of these are mixed quite well with a good sense of playfulness. Listening to this album actually makes a lot of fun. It is very enjoyable in that sense. Going through this album track by track, it becomes quite obvious that there are 2 halves at play here. The first half of this album consists mainly of big beat dance tracks that would have been more typical for what one would associate with French house music at the time, and then the second half has a little bit more experimentation, a little more of that hard electronic edge, as well as tracks that have a more meditative character, if I can say so myself. What surprises me about this album is that even with these 2 halves, there is still a good sense of cohesion between the tracks, given that they quite regularly employ the same compositional devices and play around with the layering. They don't layer around the same the same riffs, but um, but the tricks and manipulations they use are quite similar without without coming across as repetitive. The first 4 tracks of this album actually fade into each other as you're listening to them, which I have to say makes for a very pleasant surprise when you first listen to this album. That connectivity is broken by Phoenix and Fresh. However, there are still plenty of similar compositional tricks and maybe some leitmotifs that do still ensure the cohesion of this album. The track that uses layering the most effectively from this album is, perhaps unsurprisingly, Around the World, the breakout single from Homework. Beyond that, within the second half of this album, aside from the layering, there is also a sense of escalation going on between tracks as they use and expand upon various leitmotifs that previous tracks use. Rock and Roll is a pretty obvious extension of Rollin' and Scratchin'. Indo Silver Club is built upon the foundation Burning lays out, and it all culminates with Alive, a booming environmental piece with minimalist harmonies. It is the closest this album comes to a truly transcendental listening experience, and it really uses aside from using the a lot of the riffs and build up that the other tracks consist of, it serves as a perfect album closer. And it is not at all surprising that Daft Punk went on to name both of their live albums after this track. Unfortunately, it is not the album closer. That honor, or obligation, instead falls upon Funk Ad, a simplified and reversed rendition of the Funk's chorus. And I have to say, having it there after the very satisfying Alive really kind of sours the music listening experience. I personally would have cut Funk Ad entirely. But if you are to have, if it was absolutely necessary to have it, I would have instead placed it between Phoenix and Fresh. I think that would have improved the flow of this album and allowed for its character to shine through just that little bit more. Overall, while I can't really say I am blown away by any of the tracks, I have to say none of them are bad either, and I can't help but appreciate the effort and the synergy that went into its creation. While it does sound a little primitive to a modern audience, especially when compared to something like hyperpop, I think the compositional efforts that went into it still stand out and still make it worth your attention. My final rating for Homework is a 3 out of 5. And that was my review. Thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed it, then please leave a like, maybe even share this video wherever you think other people will like it as well. If you have anything you'd like to add to this video, either about the review or about the subject of the review, well, that's what the comment section is for. And if you want to see when my next video gets released, well then please subscribe. And ideally also ring the bell or do whatever else YouTube will ask of you in order to keep you notified. I also have a main channel where I talk about book-related or literature topics, a link to which you will find in the description down below. Right past my social media, which I also suggest you check out, should you choose to do so. Until next time, I have been the One Take Man.